So we have about 45 minutes to talk about procurement. And they always seem to put procurement at the end of the day. And it's always one of these topics that doesn't really grab. However, in a cloud environment, this is critical. How you buy cloud has become probably one of the biggest issues for governments adopting how they use and use effectively cloud. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the general pieces of how cloud procurement works. And then we're going to have Henry Pinto come up. Henry is from Honduras. He's actually done this from the government side. He's actually done a procurement, gone through the process, learned some of the same lessons that we've seen. He's going to talk about his experience. He'll do it in Spanish. And then we'll come back and we'll talk about some of the best practices, okay? Okay, so already talked about that, so introduction. So the biggest thing I get to do, my job takes me around the world. I get to work with governments in Europe, in Asia, and here in South America. And it's amazing to me what people say. Everybody says we're different. And the reality, at the core, how government buys and does procurement is actually very similar around the world. It's the same type of thinking, the same kind of things. My job and my team's job, and really the broader organization's job, is to help governments buy cloud effectively. And procurement tends to get in the way of that, traditional procurement. And so we're here to help with, in a sense, a cultural shift out of a traditional hardware or software buying approach to an approach that allows you to effectively use cloud. And that's a big shift. That is a cultural shift. And it affects a number of different parts of government. It affects, obviously, the technology folks. It affects how the business folks work. Procurement, legal, contracts, and finance are all involved in this. And so, one thing to think about as we go forward on this is how do you bring in those teams to drive those pieces forward, because they all have a say in it. And in the end, you end up with some governments. We've got a couple of governments we can talk about where they've actually reached a point where they can buy cloud reasonably effectively. And they're starting to really use it to transform how they use technology within their government. And that's where we want to get you to. Okay? So, I'll look at the English one. So, why is cloud different? There's an initial reaction that I'm buying more hardware or buying more software. And really what you're buying is you're buying access to a set of services, a set of building blocks online, and you're moving away from the traditional approach. So we have to get out of the thinking of physical resources, or get out of the idea of I'm building a specific set of solutions and I need a specific set of products to do that. You want to have access to all of those services. So understanding this difference is critical. So, we're working right now with governments, including in Colombia, to work through this difference and why it is different. The analogy I use is, and I'll see if I remember right, it's here in Colombia, it's home center. In the US, the Home Depot may be the equivalent. And what it is if you think about it that way, is you're coming in to access a set of services. You go to a home center to buy a set of things to accomplish something. We are these building blocks. And that's what we provide at an AWS level. And you go out and you try to find those, and you work either yourself to build something, or you hire maybe a contractor from a home center perspective, or a partner of AWS to help you build out a solution using the AWS tools. That is very different than buying from a system integrator in the traditional way where they build everything. So that is part of the cultural shift that we have to do. So I think probably everybody's seen this throughout the day, sort of understanding our model. And very quickly, 20 regions around the world, 65 AZs, huge infrastructure. We have 160 plus services, I think, at this point. I can't even keep track anymore. But recognize what this is from a procurement perspective. This is the same set of services running in all of these places for every single customer. These are not uniquely built resources. These aren't specifically built for a specific customer. All these building blocks are there for everybody to use. So anybody can log on, anybody can open an account and use this and use these services anywhere in the world. So thinking about this in a traditional data center approach is something we have to shift away from. So where are we today with procurement? How many people in this room are with government procurement? Can't see. Okay, I see a couple of hands. So government procurement right now there's been a way of buying technology that's been around for probably 30 or 40 years that people are used to buying a certain way, buying hardware, buying software, or using a system integration approach to buy a solution. And so typically these approaches they take a long time. I've been through more procurements that have taken 2 or 3 years. They are very prescriptive. Here's exactly what I want, minimal flexibility. Typically they use traditional terms and conditions, and we'll talk about those. Traditional security approaches. This is the way we've done security. This is the way we're going to continue to do security. Fixed pricing. So all of these areas are sort of traditional ways of doing things, and this is part of what we have to shift out of is this approach. So how do you get to wide adoption of the cloud? So first is understanding what the cloud is. I was just talking to a government today, and I said, have you actually used it? Have you actually got on hands on keyboard or had somebody in your team do it? No, we haven't done that yet. And I can't tell you more. You have to understand the business model of how the cloud works. I'll never forget talking to a lawyer in Brazil, and we're back and forth arguing over this issue. And we said, let's look at the console and let's go in there and do it. And it was an aha moment when we did it. And so first, just understand how the cloud works. And it's really important to do that as you go forward. Second is understand the policies around how you operate. And often there are policies around security or pricing or data sovereignty, those kinds of things. Are they policies? Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Maybe they're just sort of tradition, how you do things. Or is it a policy that can be shifted? So understand how traditional policies work with policies around the cloud. And that's an ongoing discussion that we're already having here in Colombia and elsewhere in the world. Understanding the security model. And we'll talk a little bit about the security model as we go forward. Procurement, and that's what we're here to talk about today, and that's a big chunk of this, is understanding the buying process. And finally, there's a cultural shift here, and I talked about that in the beginning, is there's a series of different groups within the government that have to think about how they shift their way of doing things. That's not easy. It can be a difficult thing to do. It is a journey, and we're happy, us and our partners, to help work through that. But ultimately, these are the steps that we've seen to get folks to wide adoption. And we've got some countries, I was talking earlier today about Singapore. Singapore has been through several steps of this, and they built out a framework, and it sort of worked. And they have finally just gone to a whole of government agreement with a number of CSPs, including us, and we're going to buy it and use it how you guys do it, is what they finally got to. It was a journey to get there. So we recognize the journey, and we're here to help you with that journey. So a couple things to understand, too. There is a conversation we have quite regularly about IaaS and then PaaS and then SaaS, and where do we slot these things? And all these, we have to fit these categories in, these lots. And I was actually talking earlier today about this, is I've been here at Amazon for 6 years. And if you asked me to put all my products into IaaS and PaaS, I would struggle with that even today. And the question is, does it really matter? Now, understanding that you need to access these services. So understand that there's some differences with them, but at the same time, you want to have access to all of them through one thing. Breaking them up into pieces makes things more difficult. On top of that, another aspect of this, too, with these 3 areas is terms and conditions, and making sure you understand how those terms and conditions work between the 3, not to have a blanket set, too. Another area to go into, but understand how that model works. Okay, so now, I'm talking theory, talking high-level things. We're going to talk reality with Henry here. So, welcome Henry to the stage.
Gracias. Bueno, gracias por estar aquí y por darme la oportunidad de compartir la experiencia que tuvimos en Honduras. Primero que nada, quiero hablarle un poco sobre qué somos y cómo hemos funcionado y todo esto. Ya tenemos un poco más de 15 años, una cosa por el estilo, un poco más todavía. En el año 2001, la Ley de Contratación del Estado crea la Oficina Normativa de Compras y Adquisiciones. Y el 2002 se crea la Ley de Simplificación Administrativa. El 2005 se crea la primera versión de Onducompras, interesante, en casa, y todo el mundo súper emocionado. Yo fui parte del equipo que creó ese sistema que todavía está funcionando, por milagros de Dios. Posteriormente, el 2013, por ejemplo, apareció la ley de adopción de un modelo un poco más simplificado en términos de electrónicos. El 2014, por ejemplo, se crea la Dirección Presidencial de Transparencia y Gobierno Digital, y con ella ONCAE, que es la Oficina Normativa de Compras y Adquisiciones, se suma a esta dirección, que es a su vez dependiente de la Secretaría de Coordinación General de Gobierno. Vamos a sentar a nuestro amigo acá. Pues bien, llegamos en el 2019 a la nube un 4 de enero. Y el tema pasó por muchas aristas que ya vamos a hablar más adelante. Sin embargo, creo que para todos nosotros, todos los países latinoamericanos, tenemos en algunas áreas del conocimiento legal, no hay ningún abogado por aquí, ¿o sí? Ok, solo hay uno. Pero no todos, ¿verdad? Lo importante es que usted está aquí y que tenemos 5 módulos en el sistema actual de Onducompras. Ha trabajado por 15 años consecutivos, esa cosa es increíble, ¿verdad? Yo no sé por qué no he muerto, pero alguien me dijo, ¿sabes qué? Porque yo estaba en otro sitio, me llamaron, me dijeron la idea de que iban a subir Onducompras a la nube, y me llamó la atención. Simplemente ese sistema es una especie de hijo mío, ¿verdad? Y ahora tendré que apagarlo y tendré que encender el otro. Y es sumamente interesante. De esos 5 módulos, 2 están en la nube en este momento. Tenemos registro de proveedores, sumamente interesante, y también tenemos el proceso de difusión de procesos. El 2018, en septiembre, Amazon firmó un memorándum de entendimiento con nuestro gobierno, donde tenía 3 objetivos principales. Y cuando lo leí, y cuando leí la visión de ONCAE, me sorprendió, porque un objetivo de ese memorándum de entendimiento era el hecho de modernizar el Estado, de simplificarlo, de darle más seguridad y, por supuesto, los costos. El segundo objetivo era un tema de capacitación, ¿verdad? De trabajar muy fuertemente con las universidades públicas y privadas. Y el tercer objetivo, también que está muy en el ambiente de Colombia, tiene que ver con el tema de apoyar las startups, por ejemplo. Y eso es lo que hace hoy día ONCAE con estos servicios en la nube. Eficientiza, busca la transparencia a lo máximo posible. Les cuento que implementamos un sistema nuevo, ¿verdad? Pero el tema allí es que las nuevas tecnologías son las que precisamente incorporar nuevos medios tecnológicos es uno de los objetivos nuestros, y con Amazon Web Services lo estamos logrando. No ha sido fácil, sin embargo, todo reto es una gran oportunidad. Eso de puede llover en cualquier lugar era un tema de estas carreras que les comenté hace un ratito, ¿verdad? En la universidad, y estos profesionales, y decían, pero es que eso es inseguro. ¿Dónde va a estar nuestra información? Bueno, ¿dónde están sus correos electrónicos? Podríamos preguntarnos, ¿verdad? ¿Dónde estarán sus fotos de WhatsApp? Y entonces, puede llover en cualquier lugar representa que cualquiera se puede meter en el mundo y bajar esa cuestión, ¿verdad? Y utilizarla y no sé qué cosa. Pero yo les decía, ¿saben qué? Hay empresas en el mundo transnacionales, súper interesantes, tecnológicas, que tienen más seguridad y más protocolos de control que hasta los mismos países, porque no se regulan a través de estos procesos, de hecho, de la administración burocrática que siguen nuestros estados, sino que son más modernas, más actuales. El segundo tema es el tema de que cómo va a estar la información del Estado en manos de terceros. Nos la van a ver, nos la van a usar. Ya lo explicaron en presentaciones previas, y tiene que ver con eso, ¿verdad? Con el tema de que Amazon no está en el negocio de andar viendo información, ni mucho menos otros terceros. Está en el negocio de brindar servicios excelentes como este. Y bueno, no hay expertos de AWS, que es el segundo objetivo que les comentaba del memorándum de entendimiento. Yo estoy adscrito a todos estos cursos que ofrece Amazon. Me parecen fantásticos porque no tengo que ir a una universidad, me parecen fantásticos porque los llevo a mi tiempo y me parecen súper interesantes porque a través del aprendizaje que uno lleva, de las herramientas y de las miles de cosas que tienen, uno puede crear otros conocimientos y otras oportunidades de negocio para su negocio, ¿verdad? La legislación nacional, como gracias a Dios, y la abogada me va a ayudar, la ley se interpreta. Entonces pudimos interpretar para bien este tema, ¿verdad? Y pudimos aprovechar esta oportunidad para eso, para entrar en este proceso de por primera vez un sistema de compras y adquisiciones del Estado estar en la nube, con un gran esfuerzo, créanlo, pero sinceramente me sorprendió cuando comenzamos la producción, cuando estábamos en producción de Compras 2, y fue tan sencillo todo. Realmente tenemos, por ejemplo, unos servidores de capacitación en casa, y que les digo, creo que nos hemos tardado como un par de meses en arrancarlo, ¿verdad? Pero esto funcionó de una forma mucho más simple. ¿Y qué vemos nosotros como usuarios? Miren, primero que nada, creo que vemos que el negocio de la empresa privada es diferente a la empresa pública. Y todo el mundo me va a decir que sí. Pero hay algo en común entre los dos, ¿verdad? Que es el tema de plata, ¿verdad? Todos andamos buscando economizar. Y si bien uno anda buscando utilidades, el otro anda buscando brindar valor a la plata de los ciudadanos. Y qué interesante todavía más cuando se genera ese valor a la plata de los ciudadanos a través de compras eficientes y que estén disponibles y que estén todos los días de todo el año, ¿verdad? Por otro lado, el tema tecnológico nos llama muchísimo la atención, ¿verdad? Comprar una memoria RAM con todos estos procesos, con posibilidades de mejora, voy a decirlo, en adquisiciones del Estado, comprar un disco duro, explicarle a alguien, oiga, mire que esta motherboard se arruinó y se tarda 2 meses en que llegue de regreso. Eso es fantástico. La tecnología de Amazon Web Services nos ha permitido y nos va a permitir poder elastizar esos servicios, ¿verdad? El costo ya lo hablaba hace un ratito, y el tema de mantenimiento todavía mucho mejor, ¿verdad? Hoy día yo tengo mi equipo enfocado, trabajando o capacitándose en temas que tienen que ver con AWS. Y es algo como un vicio, un muy buen vicio, ¿eh? Y el tema de disponibilidad. Nosotros antes, en años anteriores, hemos tenido una caída de que una o 2 veces, 1 o 2 días por año, pero con el sistema actual. Sin embargo, con evidentemente está probado a nivel mundial que su prestación es permanente, ¿no? Y bueno, ¿para dónde vamos? Tengo 6 proyectos en mente, por lo menos de los que he hablado públicamente. El tema de la firma digital avanzada, hoy precisamente se lanzó un proceso para invitar a las empresas en Honduras a participar en la firma digital que va a ser integrada en estos servicios de AWS. También el tema de la integración con otros sistemas del Estado y con la empresa privada nos va a facilitar muchísimo eso. De hecho, nuestro nuevo sistema de compras y adquisiciones está conectado con la Secretaría de Finanzas para poder asociar una compra, la planificación. Imagínense que desde la planificación uno puede estimar cuánta plata va a gastar en un trimestre, ¿verdad? Pues bueno, en la ejecución lo que sucede es que es adjudicada la empresa o la persona, y esta información se va a través de estos canales de comunicación, esta interconexión que hacemos con el sistema de finanzas del Estado y allá sigue otro proceso. Y el caso aquí es que tenemos una trazabilidad muy linda desde la planificación hasta que el tipo, por ejemplo, entrega el bien o servicio, ¿no? El tema del ahorro, yo lo he tomado como personal y es un tema de hacer una investigación comparativa entre la eficiencia de los costos con la cuales, los costos con los que incurríamos antes con respecto a lo que hacemos ahora. Y voy a hacer un data mining bastante profundo porque me llama la atención y me interesa poder justificar que vamos para la nube y que la nube no esté del todo mala, porque parece que pues en nuestra civilización la nube es algo esotérico, oscuro, allá, que llueve y toda la cosa, pero tenemos grandes oportunidades, ¿verdad? El cuarto tema es que para ambos sistemas, donde tú compras uno y donde tú compras dos, estamos extrayendo información sobre datos abiertos, los estándares de datos abiertos, lo cual me parece fantástico, ¿verdad? Para eso, para la ciudadanía, para transparentar procesos, para mejorar iniciativas inclusive. Y el tema de blockchain, estamos ahora mismo, la próxima semana, continúo con reuniones con un organismo internacional donde vamos a implementar blockchain en alguna parte del proceso y lo vamos a asociar obviamente con AWS, ¿verdad? Y bueno, y por último, el tema de la flexibilidad, porque sé que comenzamos el 4 de enero y ya hemos calculado algo en información de cuánto vamos a requerir más en términos de capacidades, y eso es sumamente interesante porque hacen falta 2 módulos más para poder implementar, y la flexibilidad que ofrece AWS es para eso, ¿no? Es para ya. Finalmente quiero agradecerles su presencia, que me escuchen y que visiten nuestro sitio también, ¿no? Gracias, señor.
Okay, so back to English. So what we're going to talk about a couple or 5 kind of core things we see about cloud. This is not everything, but it's a few things that are core around procurement and what you have to think about procurement. And so these are some very high-level sort of discussion points. Obviously, there's deeper material out there, and we can talk about that as well. So first, we talked about performance-based requirements. What we run into is we've talked about going back to the traditional approach. And we just actually ran into an RFP in another country today that the CIO's office, very excited about doing this, working with cloud, took these ideas and brought it into their procurement shop. There was never discussion between the 3 or a cloud provider like Amazon. It just went into the black hole of procurement. And what they did is they created, using their traditional approaches, a very prescriptive, a very traditional procurement approach. And so now we have a document that is going to be very difficult to use cloud effectively. What we have to shift away from is that very specific list of things and understand the broader use of cloud and how you build solutions with these building blocks. We want to have those building blocks and all of them available. We don't want to have to sit down and prescribe them. An example that we run into is creating a list. Here are the services we want, fit your services into them. And trying to fit our services into a set of prescribed requirements is actually impossible. If you go back to the original, not impossible, but very difficult. If you go back to that list of all those regions that we have and all those services that we have, us trying to fit our services and change them for each individual contract is something that doesn't work with the model. So we want to make sure we're focused not on the details of the line items and the requirements. It's actually, what is the performance that I want to get? And a good cloud procurement, a good cloud framework, a good cloud contract works around how you what you're ending up with. How well can I build a website? How fast and how effective can it be? How can I build a database? Do I have the right types of databases to do this? Will they run effectively? Is the high availability there? How do I bring these pieces together, and can I grow them and shrink them as I need to? It's focusing on the performance and building a contract to do the performance and allow the performance to be used. So, a few other things on the bottom there. We talk about some of the, and we'll talk about some of the certifications, but bringing in sort of traditional approaches around certifications and how a data center should operate. And I'll give you an example. There's another country in the world that brought in data center specifications. And one of the specifications was the thickness of the door. The thickness of the door. And somehow we know this, but our doors were a couple of millimeters short of their thickness requirement. And so that is an incredibly prescriptive requirement that has absolutely no bearing on how well you're going to operate on this. And so these are the kind of things to think about, is to understand that and allow these cloud providers to understand how they work and understand the security and all the pieces that are there, but allow them to be what they are. So over-prescription is one of the first areas that you want to understand as you're going forward on this journey. So another area is around procurement and how you buy. The initial approach, we talked about the home center analogy earlier. The initial approach is always, I want to go direct. I want to buy AWS. We are happy to do that. But we want to make sure that buying agencies, procurement or other, understand what's necessary in this. First, you can buy from us directly, but there are other options that are out there. You need the service providers to help you with that contracting piece like we talked about. Or you can buy access to AWS through one of our partners as well. So understanding that broader approach to how to buy cloud and understand there are different options to do this is critically important. So stepping back and saying, instead of the traditional, I want a distributor model or I want this model, is understanding what's there. And the best model really is having access to AWS directly, using the services, the building blocks, but having this pool of managed service providers, consultants, trainers, because the cloud is a big place. There's a lot you can do with the cloud. I feel for our solution architects. You watch their face at reInvent where we release our new services, and you see them excited but also terrified at the same time when there's 30 new services that they have to learn. And having that ability to keep up with that and having the services to do that is critical. So the takeaway from this is understanding the different models that are there and finding the best model for you and working through that model. So we talked about the direct and indirect methods, a couple of areas, and these are just very high-level things of approaches to how to buy cloud. First, we've seen countries, including the United States and in Europe, use an existing contract. They actually try to fit in cloud into potentially a hardware contract. Not the best, but it's a way to get started. It's an option, and we've seen it actually work. Or it works under a services type contract where cloud could be bought. So it's an option to think about. Creating a mechanism to buy cloud is really where we want to get to. And having a cloud-built buying mechanism. And I don't use the word framework or RFP, just whatever the buying mechanism that works within the country and the government. Buying through, like what I said, we have different types of partners. In a sense, you can buy from a partner who will actually run your workload for you on AWS. That's great. Or you can buy through a partner so you can actually put your fingers on the console and do the work yourself. Either one. Best way is to actually have both. Finally, cloud can be included as part of just a standard tender or RFP. Maybe this is one that a system integrator is going to build a broader solution. A tender can be written in a way that cloud could be included. Remember the prescriptive part I talked about? Don't overprescribe in the RFP about how that works. Instead say, how would you do the infrastructure? How would you build the platforms? And let the answer happen. Pricing. Again, pricing is an area that we have to work through and teach and understand how the pricing works. So first, AWS is a very granular set of services on purpose. It gives you incredible flexibility to use our services in the best way possible for you. If you look at one of our price lists, We are literally past 20,000 line items for a region. Now that sounds a little daunting at first, but the reality is it's incredible flexibility to use, for example, like a server. We call it an instance. How to use that in the exact way you want, buying the right kind, running the right operating system for you. We give that kind of flexibility. You want to allow that flexibility into the contract. And we were just talking today about this. Again, I had some interesting conversations about contracts that are very limited. They only allow in a certain set of services. And there's a downside to having only access to a little bit of a fuller set of things. And so we want to help people work through to have full access to that and accept the pricing model of how the cloud works, whether it's us or another cloud provider. There are these models, accept those commercial models rather than trying to impose a specific set of pricing, because doing that really takes away the benefits of the cloud. Other areas that we have to work through is different pricing models. Trying to compare different cloud providers and how they work. I've actually sat down, and I have some people in the room who are not on this one, trying to compare prices. Here's line item from this one, here's line item for this one. Line item here, line item here. After a while, your head starts to hurt. It doesn't work. Just allow them to come in and be what they are. The other one, this is what we talked about, bringing the right teams in. The finance team, the budget team. Pay as you go is a very different model than we have a CapEx model, we're spending this much this year, this is what we're spending, we know it. Pay as you go is different. Now, immediately, we don't work that way. Well, I've found with governments that if you go in deeper and you understand, governments do pay as you go models, cell phones, electricity, those kinds of things. The models are there. It's all about managing it correctly and understanding the management tools that are there, the governance model. And that's another area to talk about in this. The shared responsibility model. This is a real critical part. This crosses all of what AWS does. And when you have a solution architect come in, they'll talk about this. Salesperson will talk about this. Procurement talks about this. This covers all of our services. You have to understand it from a procurement perspective. First, if you don't understand it, at the bottom is AWS. We are responsible for the security of the cloud. So that starts from the fences to the data center, to the access to the data center, all the way up in our compute, up to the hypervisor that's operating the compute instances. Above that is where the customer is working. You're working you have this workload on there, this website, or this database. You're responsible for the security in the cloud. So an example of that would be using our identity and access management and setting that up in the way that works for you. Encryption. Using our encryption tools to encrypt the data. How people on your teams can access and utilize the cloud. There's 100 different ways our shared responsibility works. So sometimes people hear that as, oh, that means you're not responsible for this. No, we're actually giving you the responsibility. You're not hoping that your vendor's taking care of this in the right way. You're taking care of it in the right way. And obviously we have best practices. We have tools, lots of tools built into AWS to help you manage the security. So this model, you have to think about it from a procurement perspective, is if you require, like we've seen this in RFPs where they require encryption. The data must be encrypted. Well, we provide the tools to allow encryption, but we don't actually encrypt it for you. You can do the tools, and there's a variety of different ways to do it. So it's understanding that thinking around how the shared security model works into a procurement that you're going to do. So, privacy of data, there's a whole bunch of different things here around how you should take care of the privacy of it. And want to make sure I have time for questions, so I'll talk to this very quickly. First, geographic location. That's an area where people go, well, is it going to be where I need it to be? You choose where it is. We have these 20 regions around the world, and we're continuing to grow. You choose where that goes. I talked about encryption. That's your choice. All of these pieces are there. So these slides will be available afterward. You can go deeper on these slides, and we do have white papers, some very lengthy white papers on these subjects. They're fascinating reading late in the evening to read through, but no, they're seriously, when you need to understand procurement, it's worth doing the deep dive on. So we talk about also how accreditation works. Oftentimes, governments want to bring in the model they have for accrediting security and compliance. And they have a model, and they've used that model. And I'll give you an example. This is about 4 or 5 years ago in a country in Asia. They came in and said, we have this compliance model. Meet it. So we said, okay, we'll sit down and meet it. And we went through it, and what we found out, basically, this was built on ISO 27001 with a little layer on top that did nothing else. And so all of a sudden, we're sitting back saying, why do we have to comply with this model when we already, in a sense, do it? And most of the time with our accreditation certifications, we are already above and beyond that. So understand what the cloud provider brings to you rather than bringing your own, and understand how that works with the security you're trying to achieve. And that's a shift in thinking. That's bringing the security people in that we've talked about. And here's a list of some of the different certifications that we have in AWS. And this is a growing list. But understand how these work with the security and the accreditations and the compliance that you're trying to meet instead of imposing in that. And earlier in the slide deck, there was a talk about I think it's uptime. And it is a great certification for data centers. For AWS, it doesn't really work for how our model works. So asking us to meet a data center security model that doesn't work for cloud doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So putting that in an RFP and making that a requirement can be problematic. Finally, terms and conditions. Understanding terms and conditions and how the legal approach works is a critical step in this. Bringing hardware terms and conditions or software terms and conditions, sort of traditional terms and conditions, into a procurement or a framework approach typically inhibits the use of the cloud and typically can be very difficult to meet. This is where I love to try, and I know one of our lawyers is in the room, is try to have legal talk ahead of time, well ahead of time, to have an understanding. Because I've learned that when people have an understanding of why legal is a little bit different, then an interesting conversation can happen. So typically you have to think about this as a set of commercial terms, a commercial set of services. And terms and conditions need to go with that. So imposing traditional one-time terms and conditions can be difficult. Understand those commercial terms as you go forward. So finally, let's just talk about Colombia a little bit. We do sell cloud to the government in Colombia. Other cloud providers do too. There's a contract in place with our partners. This gives you a list of some of the different laws and methods that we have here. We're happy to go a little bit deeper around that. If anybody's with an agency, we can talk that through too. And what I've learned about these type of procurements, even here in Colombia, is this is an evolving thing. It takes time to learn this, and I know down here it's the same type of evolution that's happening.